what we found under the Christmas tree.
I went back home for Christmas because there wasn't anywhere else left that still felt like it belonged to me. My apartment lease had ended 2 weeks earlier, and after my father died, the idea of staying in the city felt wrong, like I was avoiding something I owed. The house sat where it always had, tucked into the hills at the end of a narrow gravel road that wound through bare hardwoods and hemlock. Snow hadn't fallen yet, but the cold had settled in early, making the woods look stiff and lifeless, like they were holding something in. My mother met me on the porch. She looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in one of my father's old flannel jackets. She hugged me hard, like she was afraid if she let go, I'd disappear again. Inside, the house smelled the same: wood smoke, dust, and that faint mineral scent that comes from well water and old pipes. Everything was quieter without my father. No radio murmuring in the kitchen. No boots by the door that weren't mine. She'd put up the tree that morning. It was the same artificial one we'd had since I was a kid. The kind with branches that never quite spread right, no matter how much you bent them. One section leaned slightly to the left because the stand had warped. Years ago, the ornaments were a mix of store-bought glass balls and old handmade ones I barely remembered making. Seeing it there made my chest ache in a way I couldn't explain. We didn't talk much that first night. Grief filled the house like fog, settling into corners, muffling everything. After dinner, my mother went to bed early, saying she was tired. I stayed up, sitting on the couch with a blanket over my legs, staring at the tree lights. That's when I noticed the box. It was tucked far back under the tree, almost pressed against the plastic trunk, wrapped in plain brown paper. No ribbon, no tag, just string tied around it in a neat cross. It didn't match anything else. All the other presents were wrapped in patterned paper, stacked neatly. This one looked separate. I asked my mother about it the next morning. She squinted at it, genuinely confused, and said she thought I'd brought it. I told her I hadn't. We shared a weak laugh, the kind you use when you don't want to think too hard about something small and strange. Neither of us moved it. I don't know why. It felt rude somehow, like touching it without permission would be a mistake. The days passed slow. The weather stayed gray, clouds hanging low over the ridges. I helped my mother with chores, fixed a loose step on the porch, split some wood. At night, I slept in my old room. The bed creaked when I turned, and the house made noises I'd forgotten. Soft pops, the distant groan of wood settling. More than once, I woke up convinced I'd heard someone moving through the living room. Each morning, the box was closer. At first, it was subtle, a few inches forward, just enough that I questioned my memory. I told myself one of us must have nudged it while vacuuming or walking past. But by the third day, it was clearly nearer the front of the tree, almost touching the edge of the rug. I mentioned it to my mother. She went quiet, stared at it for a long time, then said maybe the floor was uneven. I could tell she didn't believe that any more than I did. That night, I slept light. Sometime close to dawn, I heard a sound that pulled me out of sleep. It was faint, slow, like something being dragged across carpet. I lay there, heart pounding, listening. The sound stopped. I told myself it was the house, or maybe an animal outside, brushing against the siding.
When I finally worked up the nerve to get up and check, the living room was empty and still. The box sat where it had the night before. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep again. I started thinking about my father.
He'd been gone 3 months. The sheriff said it was exposure. He'd gone out into the woods behind the house, same as he always did. But that night, a storm rolled in faster than anyone expected. By the time they found him, he was miles away, down in a hollow he'd never had reason to be in. They said people wander when they're cold, that the body follows old paths you don't even know you remember. We never found his coat. On Christmas Eve, the box sat right at the front of the tree. My mother wouldn't look at it. Every time her eyes drifted that way, she flinched, like she'd touched something hot. That evening, as we sat eating soup at the kitchen table, she finally said she thought someone might be coming into the house at night. She didn't say who. She didn't have to. I checked the doors, the windows, the locks. Everything was fine. The snow hadn't come yet, so there were no tracks to look for. Just bare ground and dead leaves. I told her it was probably nothing, even as I felt the lie settle heavy in my stomach. That night, the dragging sound came again, louder this time, slower. I got out of bed and stood at the top of the stairs, listening. It was coming from the living room. Something was being pulled, inch by inch, across the floor. I took a step down, then another. The tree lights were on, casting long shadows. The box sat a few feet from the tree now, string taut, paper scuffed at the corners. I didn't see anything else. No movement. No one there. I went back upstairs and locked my door. I hated myself for it, for leaving my mother alone down there. But fear has a way of making you small. On Christmas morning, the house felt wrong,
too quiet. My mother sat at the table with her hands folded, staring into her coffee. She didn't say good morning. She didn't smile. When I suggested opening presents, she shook her head and said she wasn't ready. Her eyes kept drifting toward the living room. The box was in the middle of the rug. I told her I'd take care of it. She grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt and said not to. Her hand was shaking. She looked older than I'd ever seen her. "Leave it," she said. "Please." I waited until she went back into the kitchen, then knelt down and pulled the box toward me. It was heavier than it should have been. Not impossibly heavy, but dense, like the weight was wrong for its size. The paper felt cold under my fingers. I untied the string and peeled back the paper. Inside was a layer of old newspaper, yellowed and brittle. I recognized the masthead. It was from years ago. Beneath that was my father's coat. I knew it the second I saw it. The dark canvas, the frayed cuff where he'd caught it on a nail once. Mud stained the hem. It smelled like wet earth and pine needles. Cold air rolled out of the box, sharp enough to make me gasp. My mother made a sound behind me, something between a sob and a gasp. She dropped to her knees beside me and touched the coat like she was afraid it might disappear. They said it wasn't with him, she whispered. They said it was gone. We sat there for a long time. Neither of us cried. It felt like crying would break something fragile and dangerous. Later that day, the snow finally came. Thick flakes drifted down, covering the yard, the woods, the road. By evening, the world outside was white and silent. I stepped onto the porch to check the temperature and froze when I saw the tracks. Boot prints. They came from the tree line behind the house, crossed the yard, and stopped at the porch steps. There were no prints leading away. I didn't tell my mother. That night I dreamed of the woods, of walking without feeling my feet touch the ground, of something following just out of sight, keeping pace. When I woke, the house was quiet again. The tree lights were off. The box was gone. In its place, folded neatly on the couch, was my father's coat. We buried it the next morning, out back near the edge of the woods, where the ground was soft enough to dig. My mother said it felt right. I helped her, though every shovel of dirt made my chest tighter. I left the day after Christmas. I told my mother I'd come back soon, but we both knew that wasn't true. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and thought I saw someone standing at the edge of the trees, watching the road. It was probably nothing, but every year since, when Christmas comes around and the nights get long, I think about that box, about how it waited patiently, moving closer when no one was looking. And I wonder how far my father walked in the cold before he realized he wasn't alone.